Hello, dear fellow poison ivy lovers. Today I want to talk about poison ivy's hair, its changes, and how it plays into her pheromones, and tells a little bit more about how the transformation has changed her body. But first, leave a like on the video if you like my content or like this video. And don't forget to subscribe if you would like to see more. Now that that's out of the way, let's continue this theory video. So we all know what poison ivy says after her rebirth, what changes the transformation has caused to her body. But one thing she didn't say, which makes a lot of sense, is an immense increased production of the female sex hormone, also known as estrogen. What makes me think that she also produces an immensely increased level of estrogen after the transformation? It actually mostly comes down to this scene. Here you can see a vial filled with estrogen, hormones. So in my mind, it would make sense that her body is not only filled with poison, her blood replaced with aloe and skin with chlorophyll, but that her entire production of the human hormone would be changed as well, because of the strange concoction of poisons and venoms mixed with human hormones, etc. But before we take a deeper dive into the possible evidence why this might be true and the effects the increased production of estrogen has on her body and thus on poison ivy, let's take a look at what effect estrogen has on women, scientifically.
I made the perfect you in my head. 'Cause physically you are the blueprint.
There have been plenty of studies and researches done on women on what effects estrogen has on their bodies, be it during menstrual cycle, hair growth, or attractiveness of those women regarding their estrogen levels. I found an article referencing a study where they found that women who have higher estrogen levels tend to be more attractive, and thus also tend to be perceived as more attractive. Furthermore, women with higher estrogen levels tend to be healthier and more fertile. But I'll get back to the point of being more fertile later on. Maybe it goes without saying, but estrogen also causes fat to be distributed toward the cheeks, hips, and buttocks. The facial features tend to be less masculine, so not a distinct and pronounced jawline, less bone structure, etc. Another cause of estrogen, specifically higher estrogen levels than usual, is that the lips tend to be fuller, just like poison ivy after her transformation. Another effect of having higher estrogen level is having smooth, young, and firm skin with plenty of elasticity. Estrogen can also help with wrinkling of the skin and maybe even reverse it, or at least make it less pronounced. It may also help with wound healing and has plenty other positive effects. But we're not done yet. Some animal species can display physical and behavioral signals of their fertility window when in heat. The scientific wording for this is estrus, which is hormonally induced. Humans don't have this estrus phase anymore, probably due to evolution. However, I think poison ivy has gotten this estrus back through her transformation from the animal and plant toxins, poisons, and venoms. Continuing with the estrus phase, many animal species produce pheromones when in heat, or estrus. Some studies have concluded that body odor, sometimes specifically vaginal odors of females with higher estrogen levels, or women who are highly fertile, are perceived as more attractive by both men and women, further strengthening my theory on her pheromones being unisex. This information may also imply that poison ivy's pheromones might smell like her vagina, something I theorized myself, because of the fact that her pheromones work only for her. So her pheromones must have included something body-specific and not just arousing and mesmerizing substances. With this information, that body-specific scent included in her pheromones may lead to the conclusion that it's her ovulating vagina odor, which also might smell sweet, flowery, and earthy still. Now we continue with the more behavioral impacts estrogen can have on women. Several studies have demonstrated that women in their fertile phase during their menstrual and ovulation cycle tend to spend more time on their appearance and tend to wear jewelry, makeup, or hairstyles that make them more attractive. Furthermore, women with higher estrogen levels tend to purchase and wear clothing to enhancing their appearance or body, like clothing and shoes. Does this make you think of somebody? Another change that estrogen can cause in women is their vocal pitch. Women with higher estrogen levels or who are in their fertile phase tend to speak with a slightly higher vocal pitch, which makes them seem youthful, healthy, and fertile. Many often refer to poison ivy's voice as low and breathy, but if you compare her voice to Uma Thurman's voice, you can tell Uma Thurman's voice is actually naturally lower. There are also some studies that suggest estrogen can lead to hair growth. The fact that some women experience hair loss following menopause suggests that estrogen promotes hair loss. So an increased level of estrogen could lead to faster hair growth and more retention of those hairs. And then the last thing I would like to mention is partner jealousy. Men tend to be more protective and possessive of their partner when she is at peak fertility. Makes me think of the auction scene where the men are more competitive and possessive over Poison Ivy, even Batman and Robin. That was quite a lot of information in a short amount of time. But just as a summary on what I will be comparing and trying to prove with scenes from the movie, we've talked about the physical appearance of women with higher estrogen levels, their skin, estrus phase, body odor, clothing and grooming, higher vocal pitch, hair growth and partner jealousy. But what I would like to try to prove and show are how Poison Ivy's skin, clothing and grooming, higher vocal pitch, hair growth and partner jealousy. I think that all this will demonstrate that Poison Ivy is in a continuous estrus phase. In other words, she is continuously in heat and thus ovulating, which means she produces an immensely increased levels of the female sex hormone, estrogen. The physical appearance part and body odor I probably can't prove with scenes from the movie, so I want to leave those two out. Let's start with Poison Ivy's skin.
I made the perfect you in my head. 'Cause physically you are the blueprint.
I think the intro already kind of speaks for itself, but I will still shortly go over the changes to Poison Ivy's skin. Here you can tell that Ivy's skin isn't smooth and is full of blemishes. But once she's reborn as Poison Ivy, her skin seems already way smoother. And those blemishes from before seem to be gone as well. Here you can tell even better how her skin looks before the transformation. And right after the transformation, her skin already looks way clearer and smoother. Keep in mind that this is right after the transformation, so her skin will only become even more clear and smooth. Just like how very clear and smooth it is here, it looks perfect even. So her skin pheromones can be released even better and without issues like clogged pores. This scene is in between right after her transformation and her debut as Poison Ivy. Her skin seems to have become a little bit smoother already. Seems like to be the same smoothness as right after her transformation. And her skin just keeps getting smoother. And smoother. And finally, this is how smooth and clear her skin becomes. But not only her face became smooth and clear, her entire body, which causes her to look youthful and be even more beautiful. This chart shows how men rate women attractiveness on dating apps in different age groups. Men find young women the most attractive, even on older ages. So in Poison Ivy's case, looking youthful aligns with how she uses her beauty and looks to achieve her goals, which is mainly seducing men. During the shooting of the movie, Uma Thurman was around 27 years old, but she looks, in my opinion, more like around 22 or 23 as Poison Ivy. So all in all, in regards to her skin and face and body, she looks youthful and healthy, which makes her even more attractive, especially to men. And just a small side tangent, look at all those sparkles. As I said in an earlier video, I believe her skin releases pheromones through her pores, and she collects them to also use for blowing her pheromones at her targets. That's it in regards to her skin. Now let's continue with the estrus phase.
I made the perfect you in my head. 'Cause physically you are the blueprint.
Now I will try to prove why I think Poison Ivy is continuously in an estrus phase, in other words, in heat. The main reason for this is her behavior and the way she expresses her willingness to mate or to be together, either sexually or emotionally with her targets. She keeps making sexual innuendos or sometimes even being very direct about wanting to have sex, even though the sex part would never come because she kisses and kills her targets before anything outright sexual would happen. However, she has no problem sexually arousing her targets with her pheromones and body. She might touch her target, or embrace them, or lay on top of them. Here are some of the sexual innuendos she makes, showing she is continuously in heat, which means she is constantly ovulating and ready to mate. All this helps her to be even more attractive and irresistible to men.
Why not send Junior home early? I've got some wild oats to sow. Youth does have its advantages. Endurance, stamina. Forget the geriatric bat. Come, join me. My garden needs tending. Some lucky boy's about to hit the honeypot. I'll include an evening of my company for the winner. I'll bring everything you see here, plus everything you don't. I propose a pairing.
My hideout.
I'll help you grab your rocks. There's something about an anatomically correct rubber suit that puts fire in a girl's lips. Enough, sweet talk. I've always wondered, where does that big old bat light come from? I just love to see it. On second thought, you're way too old for me.
No, I'm not.
Is your thumb the only part of you that's green?
You will just have to find out. How about slippery when wet?
Poison ivy constantly brings up sexual innuendo, making her targets think about sexual things, more exactly doing sexual things with her. Seeing the footage with Commissioner Gordon, I just thought of a new theory. What if Poison Ivy sees her kiss as her giving her target the sexual pleasure one would get from sex? And that's the reason why she refuses to kiss the Commissioner. She really finds him to be too old for her, and she doesn't want to grant him the sexual pleasure she would otherwise grant others. That's it. In regards to the Estrus Phase, now let's continue with her clothing and grooming.
I made the perfect you in my head. 'Cause physically you are the blueprint.
Now, if Poison Ivy is stuck in a continuous loop of peak ovulation, a never-ending estrus phase, her behavior isn't the only thing that changes. Her wardrobe does too. According to the ovulatory shift hypothesis, women's behavior during their fertile phase reflects evolutionary adaptations designed for reproductive success. What does that mean in plain English? It means that fertile phase women naturally spend far more time on their appearance, utilizing jewelry, elaborate makeup, and hairstyles, specifically perceived as trying to look more attractive. Furthermore, studies show that during this fertile window, women tend to seek out and wear highly attractive, form-fitting clothing and accessories to enhance their physical appeal. Because Ivy's estrogen levels are off the charts, her biological imperative to attract a mate is constantly dialed up to an 11. Her clothing is no longer just fabric. It is a weaponized visual mating signal. Let's look at the evidence from the movie. Just look at her grand entrance. This outfit is scientifically engineered to exploit the male gaze. The corset cinches her waist while pushing up her bust, artificially highlighting that perfect, high estrogen hourglass figure I talked about earlier. Her hair is perfectly styled into wild, vibrant red waves, and she's adorned with botanical accessories. By framing her soft, pale skin against the dark, rich greens, she immediately commands the attention of every single man in the room. Before she even breathes a cloud of pheromones, her targets are already visually paralyzed by how impossibly sexy and inviting she looks. Then we have this incredibly tight green rubber suit. Notice how it clings to absolutely every single curve of her body. This is the ultimate manifestation of the ovulatory shift. She is instinctively choosing clothing that leaves nothing to the imagination. The high-shine material accentuates the gynoid fat distribution caused by her estrogen, highlighting the fullness of her hips, her thighs, and her buttocks. It looks like a second skin. When men see her walking in this, their testosterone spikes. The visual framing of her body is so arousing, so unapologetically fertile that men are reduced to putty in her hands. She knows exactly how irresistible this skin-tight material makes her look. And finally, as her confidence and her estrus peak, she transitions into her red suits. Red is universally recognized as the color of lust, arousal, and extreme fertility. When she is lounging on that giant pink and red flower bed, she is the literal center of a massive, blooming reproductive organ. The tight red bodysuit she wears during the climax is arguably her most arousing look. It clings tightly to her chest and waist, but now it features sharp, spiky accessories around her wrists and chest. It screams, "Look at me, desire me." but know that I am dangerous. It frames her body so perfectly that even Batman and Robin struggle to fight off their primal urges. Every single costume she wears is impossibly tight, deeply colorful, and perfectly tailored to emphasize a body overflowing with female sex hormones. She doesn't just want her targets to smell her pheromones. She wants them completely visually intoxicated the second they lay eyes on her.
I made the perfect you in my head. 'Cause physically you are the blueprint.
Now, let's talk about something a little more subtle, but just as mesmerizing, her voice.
Why not send Junior home early? I've got some wild oats to sow.
When we think of a seductive voice, we often think of something low, husky, or deep. And while Poison Ivy's voice is definitely breathy and incredibly smooth, if we look at the science of ovulation and estrogen, something very interesting is happening here. Studies have found that women in their fertile phase actually speak with a slightly higher vocal pitch. Furthermore, recordings of women's voices during this high fertility window are consistently rated by both men and women as being significantly more attractive than recordings of those same women during their low fertility phases. A higher pitch subconsciously signals youth, health, and a peak state of fertility to potential mates. Now, you might be thinking, but Ivy's voice sounds so sultry and low. Well, to really hear the difference the transformation made on her body, we have to compare Poison Ivy's voice to Uma Thurman's actual, natural speaking voice.
The nature of most Batman villains is that they're dual personalities. You know, they're originally somewhat well-intended. So Pamela Isley is the mad botanist, who's slightly cracked.
Do you hear the difference? Uma Thurman's natural register is actually quite deep, rich, and grounded. But when she becomes Poison Ivy, a woman locked in a continuous, high estrogen estrus phase, her vocal pitch shifts upward. It becomes lighter, more melodic, and incredibly breathy.
Poison Ivy.
Poison Ivy.
Poison Ivy.
Poison Ivy.
She isn't just talking to her targets, she is auditorily seducing them. Because her estrogen production is practically overflowing, her vocal cords naturally adjust to emit this higher, incredibly feminine pitch. This is an evolutionary trick to make her sound as desirable and irresistible as possible. When she whispers a sexual innuendo in that sweet, elevated, breathy tone, it bypasses her victim's logical brains completely. It triggers a primal, biological response in men, making them perceive her as the ultimate, most fertile mate imaginable. Combine that sweet, fertile, high-pitched voice with her mind-altering pheromones and her skin-tight clothing, and it is scientifically and biologically impossible for any man to resist her.
I made the perfect you in my head. 'Cause physically you are the blueprint.
Now, we move on to another very physical and very noticeable change brought on by her continuous estrus phase, and that is her hair growth. Take a close look at her hair right after she is reborn from the plant toxins. When she first rises from the ground, her hair is a vibrant, beautiful red, but it only reaches just past her shoulders. It is thick and wild, but relatively short. Now, keep in mind that the events of this movie seem to take place over just a couple of days. But let's look at her hair a little bit later in the film. When she dons the tight green bodysuit, her hair has grown to an absolutely astonishing length, even with a massive portion of it styled upward into those iconic, towering hair horns. The rest of her hair cascades all the way down to her lower back and rests right above her ass. For her hair to reach that length, especially with so much of it tied up, it would have had to grow feet in a matter of days. So, how is this possible? Scientifically, it all comes back to her wildly accelerated estrogen production. Research indicates that estradiol, which is a highly potent form of estrogen, interacts directly with hair follicles through estrogen receptors. By binding to these receptors, estrogen can drastically alter hair follicle growth and cycling. We know this because when women go through menopause and their estrogen drops, they often experience hair loss, which strongly suggests that high estrogen actively promotes hair growth and retention. Because Ivy's body is pumping out extreme, superhuman levels of estrogen to maintain her continuous estrus phase, her hair follicles are essentially in overdrive. Her hair grows at an accelerated, monstrous rate, becoming incredibly thick, lush, and long. And from an evolutionary and seductive standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Long, thick, shiny hair is universally perceived as a prime indicator of female health, youth, and fertility. That massive mane of red hair acts like a beacon, drawing the male gaze and framing her delicate face and her hourglass curves perfectly. It is just one more biological tool her body uses to make her look like an absolute goddess of fertility, ensuring that anyone who looks at her is instantly captivated.
I made the perfect you in my head. 'Cause physically you are the blueprint.
Now, for the final and perhaps most destructive effect of her continuous estrus phase, partner jealousy. Scientifically, several studies have found that men tend to become far more protective, possessive, and intensely jealous of their partner when she is at peak fertility. When men interact with a woman during her fertile window, their testosterone actually spikes as a competitive response to ward off other potential mates. Because poison ivy is in a state of continuous estrus, she turns this biological quirk into a devastating weapon. As I theorized earlier, her unique pheromones aren't just generic perfumes. They are deeply body-specific and likely carry the intoxicating, sweet scent of her own ovulating vagina. When her targets breathe this in, their primal brains don't just register her as an attractive woman, they subconsciously lock onto her as their actual or potential sexual mate. Because they perceive themselves to be her chosen partner, that evolutionary partner, jealousy kicks into overdrive. Anyone who smells her and remains in her close proximity is immediately brainwashed into a fiercely competitive, possessive state. We see this flawlessly executed between Batman and Robin. Robin breathes in her pheromones and immediately becomes dangerously possessive over poison ivy. He completely discards his loyalty to Bruce because his estrogen-intoxicated brain sees Batman not as a mentor, but as a sexual rival. Robin perceives Batman to be jealous of him and Ivy, and frankly, it goes both ways. Batman is equally affected, and their bickering is the exact competitive, testosterone-fueled response that male animals exhibit when fighting over a highly fertile female in heat. She doesn't even have to touch them to tear them apart. Her biology, her pheromones, and her peak ovulation do all the work, driving men to madness just for the chance to mate with her.
I made the perfect you in my head. 'Cause physically you are the blueprint.
So, what does all of this biological evidence ultimately mean for poison ivy? It means her transformation didn't just give her toxic blood and plant powers, it actually turned her entire body into the ultimate, living aphrodisiac. By locking her physiology into a continuous estrus phase, she is overflowing with peak levels of estrogen. Every single curve accentuated by her corsets, every high-pitched, breathy whisper, and every inch of those tight costumes is a biological weapon. Her body is specifically designed to completely captivate and sexually arouse her targets, drawing men in exactly like helpless FLIs to a gorgeous Venus flytrap. She doesn't even have to try. The sweet, earthy pheromones of her continuous ovulation bypass a man's logic entirely and go straight to his most primal urges, forcing his body to react. Because of these extreme physiological changes, she has become literally sexually irresistible. When her targets look at her flawless skin, smell her intoxicating scent, and hear her sweet voice, they aren't just looking at a beautiful woman, they are looking at a walking, talking biological imperative to mate. They are completely consumed by lust, driven mad by jealousy, and desperately willing to do absolutely anything just to get a single, fatal kiss. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the intoxicating science of poison ivy. If you loved exploring her irresistible physiology, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below, which of her seductive traits do you find the most captivating?